Hey, what's up everybody? It's another episode of Daredevil Born Again to have a look at. It's episode 4 and quite a good one because we've got a few surprises, so let's get straight into it. The beginning of this episode picks up from where the last one left off, after Hector is essentially assassinated once he gets basically found not guilty in the trial, goes off to be White Tiger and gets shot in the process. Now everyone is assuming that it's probably the cops because obviously they didn't like the fact that he got set free, but there's no proof of it, there's no evidence of it. But the beginning of this episode is basically that his body is in the morgue, all of his White Tiger costume is being kind of bagged up and taken away, and his niece walks in as Matt Murdock is there at the morgue wanting to kind of say goodbye, see her uncle, see what's left of him, see what the cops did, and she is very obviously upset and also making the point that it surely had to be the cops that did it. And she's kind of just like eating away constantly at Matt, and you can kind of tell that it is just eating away at him, the fact that he's not being Daredevil, he's not actually kind of making sure that justice is actually happening. And it's just her presence and her tone and the things that she says, the way she says them, it's very much a kind of like, you've got to be Daredevil again to make this right. And even though that's not what she says, and of course she doesn't know that that's who he is, you know that that's basically what he's picking up on. Then what happens is a little bit weird. We then get to see this whole new character that we've never actually come across before in a kind of like white superhero suit, masked. It's very similar to White Tiger, but mostly really just because of the colouring of it. And he seems to be carrying a body through a subway station. That's kind of all you can really tell. He's underground and you only see him for a brief moment, but it's a very mysterious kind of, who is this guy? Don't really have any context. Don't see him for more than just a couple of seconds, and he's there and just seems very mysterious, and he seems to be quite a dark character. So just a weird little introduction with no kind of backstory, no explanation, but clearly this is going to be, I think, something that carries the series forward into its second half. He comes back later on in that particular episode though, and what he actually does is very shocking, and he's definitely, I think, supposed to be a bad guy, but we'll get into that later on. What comes next is seeing Wilson Fisk and Vanessa having more marriage counselling and going through therapy with a therapist who happens to be Matt's girlfriend, for want of a better word. And at the time I was thinking, oh, I'm probably not actually going to mention this, but it becomes really relevant for later on, because during that conversation and during the counselling, we see or hear that while Wilson was off basically in prison or away or whatever, Vanessa was kind of left not knowing when he was going to come back. She felt betrayed and actually ended up cheating on him with some random guy called Adam. Now this becomes really relevant later, not because their marriage is going to fail because of it or they're not going to recover or whatever, but Adam is actually kind of a bit of a key character in this to some degree. We'll find out later as to the reason why. Then moving down, what happens next? Basically, Matt ends up in the police station. He's taking on a new client for petty theft, essentially. But whilst he's there at the police station, he runs into the cop who he had that fight with in the apartment, saving the witness in previous episodes. He was basically one of the cops that was beating up on the informant that Hector had tried to save. Basically the dodgy cop, like the dodgiest one of them all. And Matt starts making very like accusations and various comments of things to suggest he thinks that this cop was the guy who probably killed Hector. But the cop actually turns around and says he had nothing to do with it, doesn't know anything about it. You assume that he's lying, but Matt can hear his heartbeat, and his heartbeat suggests actually he's telling the truth, which is a little bit unusual because he was prime suspect number 1, certainly to me. So the mystery is still out there as to who actually killed Hector. It actually doesn't appear to be this cop, which makes it even more mysterious as to who may have actually done it. This random guy that Matt is now acting for, this client that he's taken on, has been arrested for petty theft, alleges that he didn't do it, is basically pleading that Matt needs to get him parole, but he's got a massive criminal history, so it's very unlikely, and it just becomes this weird little dynamic between these two. Very much a side character and not really relevant, but I think the point of it is that it's still showing to Matt that the system, it's very, very broken. It's definitely not working. The system is letting down people. It's obviously the reason why Hector got killed. You can't trust the cops. They're basically corrupt. They're going out and killing people, beating up people and getting away with it. If they do actually manage to get caught out, they just end up being able to kill whoever they want. And not only that, but now we've got this other guy who is being arrested for this petty theft, and it's sort of the reason why he's having to do it is to survive. And again, it's the system kind of letting him down, and he gives this very kind of emotional, not speech, but little dialogue between him and Matt, where he's basically saying he had no choice. He wants, you know, to eat, and he's relying on scraps, but he can't get, you know, he can't get support from local government because of XYZ, and you know, it's all just basically that he's a victim of the system essentially, and that's the reason why he had to do it. And again, it's a little bit like Hector's niece. I think it's all kind of just to eat away at Matt and just to try and get him to get to a breaking point where he's just got to become Daredevil again and put on that suit, because it's the only way that justice can truly be done and that he can actually help people. So it's just these little things, the niece, this random guy, they're just eating away at him. But even more so with what happens later. Fisk, meanwhile, is going through a similar thing. Rather than him trying to go and beat people up, he's trying to stay good himself, because obviously he's now a politician. He wants to be seen to be doing it clean, without any corruption, and doing it right. So he's trying to use the system. But he similarly is being really, really tested. He can't get things done that he wants to do because there's too much red tape to get it through government. He wants to do all of these projects and building things and trying to make the city better, but he can't because he's sort of red taped by government rules and procedure and all this kind of stuff. So straight away we're seeing that he's also kind of just being eaten away at for not being able to do what he wants to do. So it's the system kind of letting him down now as well. And throughout the same episode, it's this duality between him and Matt, which is just really brilliant in this season. And it's, you know, he's trying to be a good guy, he's trying to be the good politician and not be Kingpin, and doing things right and above the board. So you've just got this weird dynamic is still going on between him and Matt, but it's really, really evident in this particular episode because things start to go wrong and someone within his team has accidentally leaked something. And when he starts hollering and shouting at his team, you know that his temper is full on Kingpin temper. He's going to kill someone. And amazingly, the guy that did it actually steps forward and admits that he was the one that had leaked this story by accident. It got out, and therefore all the press and media are now portraying Fisk in a really bad way. He orders all of his team to leave the room except for this one guy and one other person. And you just assume that what Wilson Fisk is going to do is exactly what we're used to seeing him do, which is to absolutely kill him and beat the crap out of him and punch him and go mad and go nuts and just let out all this violent rage that he has. And instead, he just listens and then forgives him. He doesn't even fire him. So it's this weird thing where he suddenly is like a really forgiving character, and it's very strange to see. It's incredible character development, but you just don't know how genuine it is. But actually, the way that it's portrayed, it does seem really genuine. He actually really doesn't want to do bad things anymore. But is that true? Is that something you can really trust? And as the episode goes on, we will find out. Meanwhile, Matt is trying to find evidence about the killer of Hector, of the White Tiger, and goes to the scene of the crime where he was shot and manages, through weird magically enhanced senses that he has because he can't see, he manages to find the bullet casing from the actual execution, and lo and behold, it's got a Punisher logo on it. Yet again, we see Punisher logos coming up all the time, and this is now another one, and Matt actually knows where Frank Castle is hiding, so he tracks him down, and we finally get Frank Castle back again. And we see him not in like a full-on Punisher garb, but he still is Frank Castle. He is still really, really cool. And he's basically hiding out in some basement somewhere with all of his security cameras and police radios and guns stacked up here, there and everywhere. And it's still the same old Frank Castle doing what he does. But Matt essentially turns up to really question, you know, why is it that this bullet casing has got the Punisher logo on it? Frank ultimately turns around and says that it's just a bunch of fanboys that are copying his logo and using it, and that they're trying to administer their own form of justice. It's got nothing to do with Frank whatsoever. It's not him who's behind it. We knew that it never would be. But the dynamic between the two is really interesting, because then what happens is that they start essentially having an argument between the two of them. And it's the same thing that they normally do. Frank Castle is the Punisher. He's a vigilante, but on the most extreme level. He doesn't go out to arrest people. He doesn't go out to serve justice. He goes out to punish them, and he goes out to get rid of them. That's his MO. Daredevil is the exact opposite. He goes out there to make sure that justice is served, and he doesn't kill people. He gets them arrested and puts them through the system. So there's this big difference between the two of them in the way that they behave as vigilantes. And when they're talking, Frank is like really laying into him heavy about the fact that he can tell that Matt is suppressing being Daredevil, but more to the point, suppressing the fact that Matt, Daredevil, really wants to go that one step further and actually has guilt for the fact that he had done, because he did try and kill Bullseye. He pushed him off of a roof. It just didn't work. So it's that, but more than anything else, it's the guilt and the grief that he feels for the fact that obviously Bullseye had killed Foggy. And more than anything else, and what Frank is saying is that the reason why Matt is struggling to deal with it and why he feels so guilty is because he's never got any kind of revenge. He's never avenged Foggy in any way, shape or form. He's never done anything to make up for the fact that Foggy is dead and Bullseye is still breathing. So Frank is really just laying it on really, really heavily and starts to obviously talk about the fact that that's why he does what he does, because his own family were killed, and that's why he goes out and does things the way that he does them, which is obviously a lot more extreme. And it's just that way that Frank Castle has this ability to deliver lines in such a way that it's so deeply raw and incredibly emotional, and it eats away at Matt so much that he starts lashing out a little bit, throws a couple of punches, but more than anything else, he just breaks down completely in tears. Like, he's physically struggling so much. And you just know that what Frank is saying is just eating even further away at Matt's armor. And sooner or later, he knows he's got to be Daredevil again, and it's going to come out. But it's just brilliant dynamic between these two characters, and so beautifully well done. The acting from John is just absolutely brilliant. The way he delivers the lines for Frank Castle is just extraordinary. And it's always this thing where, you know, he's an anti-hero, Frank Castle. He shouldn't really be lovable, but he is, just because of the fact that his emotion is so raw. You feel for him so much. So this scene was fantastic, and it's obviously, we've wanted to see Frank Castle come back so much that, you know, we're finally getting that, and it's done really, really well. So massive kudos to the way that they set this up. It was so well done, and hopefully we'll see more of him. But ultimately, as far as the storyline is concerned, the two go their own way. Frank doesn't know who it was that killed Hector. It's got nothing to do with him, and ultimately them sticking the Punisher logo on the bullet casing is just a fanboy kind of thing, and that they're just using his logo because they like the Punisher and the things that he stands for, but it's not actually him, which is what we kind of knew. So anyway, they go their separate ways. Frank stays in this basement wherever he is, and Matt wanders off. The next three scenes are the most important thing. And first of all, what you get is Wilson Fisk going into this kind of very fancy looking basement, and he's on his own. It's a very like secure facility, but in typical Fisk style, it's very lavish with paintings, and it's very ornate in this kind of stuff and very interestingly lit, but it's very dark and cringy and kind of creepy. And then you find that he goes down there, sits at a table with some very nice looking food on it, very fancy wine, and just sits down and starts to eat. And then all of a sudden there's this voice whining in the background asking for Fisk to help him. And it turns out that Adam, the guy who Vanessa had an affair with, Fisk is basically keeping him prisoner in some basement in a cage, beaten and bloodied and in an absolute state. So essentially, Kingpin never went anywhere. Kingpin has got this guy locked up in a basement, torturing him, beating him up, eating in front of him, and probably starving him. And he looks like he's been there for a very, very long time as well. So finally, we actually see that Fisk is still the same Kingpin. He may very well be trying to do things right from his mayor point of view, but he's still the same bad guy. He's literally got people stuck in his basement in cages. So it's a shocking revelation. But at the same time, we see that Matt is actually kind of showing the same process in the same way in terms of the chinks in the armor. He at night goes up to this kind of like secure room, opens it up. All of his Daredevil masks in all the different colors are all laid out on a table, and he looks at those. Well, he doesn't look at them, but he knows they're there. But he picks up his batons and he starts to train with them. He starts practicing. So you've got Fisk, who's essentially torturing some poor guy in a basement somewhere, and you've got Matt, who is seemingly training for Daredevil fight and combat. So you've got these two characters who I think are just at the absolute limit of what they can tolerate without doing things the way that they normally would do them, which is A, as a vigilante, and B, as a criminal kingpin. So you've just got this incredible dynamic still going on between the two of them, but we now finally see them for who they really are. One is Daredevil, one is Kingpin. Doesn't matter how they pretend to be to other people, we now finally see them as themselves. So presumably in the next few episodes, they're going to come out swinging properly. We don't know. I think there's still going to be probably another couple of episodes before they fully really become who they're supposed to be. But the next scene is the thing I think that will drive everybody to being their full-on criminal vigilante selves. And that is this weird guy in the white costume who comes back, who we'd seen at the very beginning of the episode. But what we see is actually really, really shocking. So he drags yet another body through the subway or, underground, lays him out on a table and is pumping blood out of all of these weird victims in some odd medical experiment, torturous sort of scene. And it's actually very shocking. There seems to be people hung up, having blood taken out of them, and this guy who he's just laid down on the table sort of wakes up, but there's tubes coming out of his legs, sucking up all the blood and all this kind of stuff, so he's screaming in agony, and meanwhile this guy in a white suit is just staring and doing it. So it's weird and it's shocking and it's kind of cool, but in a gruesome way. And whoever this guy is, because it doesn't give you any context whatsoever as to what's going on. The blood draining thing looks very similar to what we saw in the Defenders, and so Daredevil season 3 when we had the hand. So we're going way back to that. If it's got anything to do with that, it might not, but it's weird that they're going through the same kind of draining thing with all of these random victims. So there's that potentially, but also I think the guy behind that mask is the guy that we saw in one of the earlier episodes when that therapist that Matt is seeing, there was just this random guy, and if you see in the vlog that I did at the time, I think episode 2 potentially, it may have even been episode 1, but just this random guy who's at the book signing and just wants to get his book signed. He's there, but there's a lot of focus on him, even though we don't know his name, don't know why he's there, got no context, got no backstory. You don't know that it's him in this mask, but I think that it is. The eyes are very similar, and it would make sense as to why we had this random focus on a character at the beginning for no real reason, and now we've got somebody who's again showing up for no real reason, out of context, doing horrible things. So I think that they are the same, and that will probably get confirmed at some point, or I could be completely wrong and it's someone entirely else, but it would make sense to be that guy, whoever he is. So a bit of a weird one, bit of a mystery. With 2 episodes behind, we've still got 5 and 6 to catch up on, but we're away at a Comic-Con this weekend. So with that said, do stay tuned, do subscribe. We'll see you at Comic-Con this weekend, and we'll see you for more Daredevil reviews in the next couple of weeks. So with that said, and on that sort of terrible disappointment, I'll see you guys real soon. The vlog is over.